Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Kentucky Case Files, a true crime podcast where we dive deep into Kentucky-based true crime stories, both infamous and overlooked. I'm Marcus Roland.
And I'm Emily Beaulieu Steele, and this is the Clay Shrout Case, Part 1, entitled, I'm Going to Be on CNN.
Friends are stunned at what he's accused of doing.
It's like another side nobody's ever seen.
Yeah.
It's like
The evil side.
it's like the back of his mind just came out.
He confesses to the crimes, saying he was angry at his parents for disciplining him.
What I did was I killed 4 human beings and I took about 20-something more hostage.
Now, the reason I picked this one, it hits close to me. I live in Lexington, Kentucky now, and Northern Kentucky was my home growing up, specifically Walton, Kentucky, and then later for a little while I lived in Florence, Kentucky. But it was in the mid-90s, specifically 1994, where Boone County would be rocked by 4 horrendous murders of a father, a mother, and their 2 young daughters, all perpetrated by the family's son.
This is the story of Clay Shrout and the chilling murders that left Florence and the rest of northern Kentucky reeling.
Now, on May 26, 1994, I was a brand new lawyer. I was working for Thomas Willenberg out of Covington in Kenton County, Kentucky. And now, Tom was a solo practitioner and was also the juvenile public defender. And so on May 26, I received a call. I was out in the Boone County office. I received a call from Tom's assistant in Covington that a high school kid had murdered his entire family earlier that morning. Now, Tom was in court and was unable to meet with this individual, as was the juvenile public defender in charge of all the public defenders in the juvenile court system, whose name was Ed Drennan. I was probably going to have to go meet with this kid, and that terrified me for a multitude of reasons, of course. But Tom eventually got out of court and met with Clay, and I was relieved, although I would later have a brief-ish encounter with Shrout later on in the case.
To understand what happened on May 26, 1994, we naturally start with the Shrout family. The Shrouts lived at Tiburon Drive in Florence in an upper-middle-class neighborhood. They had a nice 2-story brick home with a swimming pool and a finely manicured lawn. Kids could occasionally be seen playing basketball in the driveway. The family's exterior was, well, seemingly perfect. They were said to have lived a charmed life. Walter, 43, and Becky, 44, were described as a relatively quiet couple who kept to themselves, not participating in the various neighborhood activities, but otherwise known as very nice people. They first met while attending Georgetown College in Georgetown, Kentucky, and had 3 children. Clay was the oldest. Clay was a high school senior at Ryle High School and had a reputation for being quiet and academically gifted. He excelled in school and was a computer whiz. One newspaper account indicated that he built radios and even tried to build a laser. All the kids excelled in school, with Kristen, 14, and Lauren, 12, demonstrating their gifts in and out of the school with their busy extracurricular activities. Kristen and Lauren stood out among the Shrout children as they were more outgoing, embracing the arts, competing in equestrian events, and participating in intramural sports and gymnastics. Clay's friends described the girls as being the objects of greater affection and praise than Clay.
The Shrouts were also a religious family. They attended church at Florence Christian Church, where both Walter and Becky taught Sunday school and were involved in numerous church activities. Walter also was a successful businessman, and Becky was a former teacher still actively involved in the local PTA and various school functions. She decided to retire early from teaching to stay at home with Clay, Kristen, and Lauren. Now, that's pretty significant right there, that we're talking in the mid-90s. It was very rare to see a one-income family making a living with 3 children and living in the area of northern Kentucky where they did live, with a swimming pool, a very nice house. I think that speaks to Walter's success in the business world and adds another layer to this seemingly perfect, normal, wealthy family.
Murphy described Clay as always quiet, intelligent, but not outgoing. He also remembered Clay always wearing black to church.
Clay's friends said that they liked going to his house because his parents were so nice. Things at the Shrout home really just seemed normal, but under that seemingly normal exterior, something was brewing. Clay had a job at a local fast food restaurant where he was described as conscientious and a perfectionist. And on May 16th, 1994, just 10 days before the murders, Clay just abruptly quit by jumping out the drive-through window and walking away. Later, he claimed the reason was he was just tired and had a lot of things on his mind and going on in his life. But by this time, Clay's moods and behaviors had been going through some rather dramatic changes.
Yeah, in the year prior to the murders, Clay broke up with his girlfriend. He talked of suicide. He started bragging about doing drugs and drinking. Some reports indicated Clay had suffered from some depression, but during the time immediately before the murders, his depression worsened. Clay started shoplifting and stealing things like stop signs and bragged that he had a group of 50 people ready to steal a stoplight. Clay also became consumed by death and gore. Friends said this was unusual as he had an aversion to violence because he had once witnessed his father shoot a bird. Clay's previous aversion to violence transformed into an obsession in the year prior to the murders when he would talk with friends about suicide and murder. He became fascinated with weapons and collected knives, brass knuckles, BB guns, and a variety of other non-lethal weapons. He also spoke of buying a Glock and had constructed a lot of pipe bombs, claimed a friend of his, Dave Suarez.
And on top of all that, he also owned a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook, which was a 70s revolutionaries guide that included instructions for bomb making. Clay would spend more and more time in his room downloading information from the internet on how to build a bomb. Okay, so that's really interesting. 1994, and he's on the internet looking up information.
I mean, we need to keep in mind when we think about kids being on the internet, to fast forward 20 years and 30 years, and it pretty easy to find information. But that was not the case in 1994. I mean, this is back when your family's got AOL and dial-up, and you're having to work
DOS.
hard. I mean, I would have no clue. So yeah, I think again, it speaks to a level of sort of his advanced intellect.
He would tell his friends he was going to build a bomb to blow up the whole neighborhood. And following the murders, police found some of these attempts at bomb building. He would say to his friends, for example, let's go out and kill someone. Some classmates described him as scary looking given his choice of dress, the black clothing, trench coat, army boots, and change. I think it's interesting to observe here that Clay's crime predates the Columbine shooting by 5 years, where the teen killers were known as the Trenchcoat Mafia and adopted a similar attire. Clay would also bring bullets and knives to school to show them off to friends. His drug and alcohol abuse, which he often bragged about, increased, as did his depression.
Friends spoke about other disturbing changes in his behavior in the year leading up to the murders, and the darkness even entered into his academics. He would write morbid poetry and stories. He started harming himself and began dabbling in the occult, becoming obsessed with witchcraft and vampires. He showed one friend 10 cuts on his arm, which he claimed were part of a vampire ritual. And he was having angry outbursts. His anger became more dramatic to the point where he would kick the family's 2 caged Dalmatians.
He would brag about his drinking and drug use, which included, according to him, taking LSD. And now the Kentucky Post reported that the police somehow had heard that Shrout might be using LSD and were planning to interview him on the day of the attack. But before they found him, he was already in custody for murder. And there was no evidence that he might have been under the influence of drugs or alcohol at the time of the murders, as no drug testing was done. All of these behavioral changes were also taking a toll on Clay's academics. When his grades greatly declined, his parents grounded him, and Clay began talking about killing his English teacher, who he felt singled him out and graded him unfairly. He was even suspended for bringing a stun gun to school just days before. The suspension and the declining grades led his parents to increase their punishments, which included taking away his computer, his heavy metal music, his weapons, and his truck. The following description may be upsetting to some listeners.
At 5:30 a.m. on May 26, 1994, while Walter, Becky, Kristen, and Lauren slept, Clay went to his father's Jeep, where his father kept a .38 caliber pistol. He then went back into the house where his parents and sisters were still asleep. He entered his parents' bedroom first to find them still asleep while the family's poodle, Lady, snoozed between them. He first pointed the gun at his mother and shot her between the eyes. He then shot his father. In the hallway, as he walked to his sister's rooms, he encountered Kristen, who had awakened at the noise. She asked him about the noise, and he told her he had accidentally set off a gun. She chastised him for not being more careful. He then shot her in the chest. He heard a noise coming from his parents' room, where he returned to find his father, Walter, still alive. Walter had pulled himself up on the side of the bed and was uttering, "Oh my God, oh my God." Clay fired 2 more times, missing with one shot which went through the bedroom window, but finally killed his father with the third to the head. He went to Lauren's room and found her awake. He briefly talked to her about a dream she was having. He then shot her in the head.
Everyone was gone, but Clay was not finished. Clay calmly cleaned himself up, retrieved the gun, and got ready for school. Before leaving, he again entered his parents' room to recover his possessions that his parents had confiscated from him as punishment. And on his way to his father's Jeep, he happened to run into a neighbor and told the neighbor, "You don't know me, but my name is Clay Shrout, and you're going to hear a lot about me today. I'm going to be on CNN." After killing his family, Clay headed to Ryle High School, and on the way called his friend Richard Brown on his cell phone. Again, this kid had a cell phone in the
In the
mid-90s.
mid-90s. That wasn't widespread in my world for teenagers until very well into the 2000s.
Not at all. That's
A significant level of with this
yes.
family.
We told Richard what he had done, and he said, "I killed them all." Now, Brown was one of those kids who considered himself part of the Shrout family. He was good friends with Clay. He spent a lot of time there, and he didn't believe him. He thought Clay was kidding. Clay told him to drive by the house to see the bullet hole in the window and said he could go inside and take anything he wanted since nobody would be needing it.
Along the way, Clay stopped at a convenience store to get juice before driving to the house of a female friend, Danielle Bush. He forced her into the Jeep and drove her to Ryle, even though Bush was not enrolled there. They arrived and entered the school. Clay first tried to track down his English teacher and one of the assistant principals, who he intended to kill because they had suspended him for bringing a stun gun to school. Not finding them, he went to his calculus and trigonometry class, where his favorite teacher, Mrs. Carol Kanabrowski, was teaching. Kanabrowski was surprised by Shrout's unusual tardiness and the unknown student with him. Boone County Police Captain Jeff Martin believed that had Clay found either his English teacher or the principal, there most certainly would have been more killing. Kanabrowski questioned Shrout about the girl. Clay responded that someone was holding a class hostage. When Kanabrowski asked who, Clay responded, "It was me." He then brandished the gun and calmly walked to the teacher's desk and cocked the handgun, ordering Kanabrowski to, quote, teach. Clay told his classmates that he'd killed his family, but assured them he wouldn't harm anyone else. A student knocked on the door to have Kanabrowski sign an absence form, and she mouthed the words, "He has a gun." The student ran to the front office and informed Assistant Principal Stephen Sorrell, who contacted the teacher over the private intercom system, requesting that she provide only yes or no answers. He told her he was aware of the situation. He asked her to send a student to the front office as the reason he had contacted her. The school went into immediate lockdown as police raced to the school.
Now, Sorrell went immediately to the classroom and knocked on the door. And when Mrs. Kanabrowski answered the door, he asked her to step out and then immediately took her place. He motioned for the other students to leave the classroom, and he asked Shrout if that was okay, but he did not give him a chance to answer. Sorrell said, "I just got them out." And once the students had left, it was just Shrout and Sorrell. And here's what Stephen Sorrell, the assistant principal, had to say about what happened that day.
There were 24 kids in there plus a teacher, and I wanted to make sure all were safe. I was going to do whatever I had to make sure that happened. I knew that I could get to the desk quickly, and if he raised a gun, it was going into my stomach. It wasn't going anywhere else. I certainly hope that didn't happen, but yeah, I had consciously made that decision already. I went down actually with the idea of getting the flesh of my hand between the trigger and the gun so it wouldn't go off.
Sorrell then asked Shrout for the gun, and Shrout said he would have to think about it. But a few minutes later, Shrout handed the gun over, and a police officer was already in the hall, and Shrout peacefully surrendered.
And as soon as I got my hand on the gun, he released it. I took the gun and turned around and saw the officer at the door.
I mean, just to think about this, Mark, this is pre-Columbine. School shootings have not become a commonplace occurrence. And this assistant principal just figures it out on the fly, and he has to handle the situation.
And he was very clear as to what he was going to do as well. And, well, you're an educator, you're a college professor, but I mean, do you have to go through any type of training for situations like this? Is that something that you?
We at the institution I have worked at, we don't have trainings. Now, what is in place is an active shooter warning system.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there was a very scary episode this past academic year where that system malfunctioned, and it was sending messages not only to people's phones in their offices, but broadcasting on a loudspeaker throughout a classroom. And it took a while for the system to get back online. And we in our offices were notified pretty quickly. For the folks in the classrooms, it took quite a while to get word to them, and folks were understandably very shaken up.
Oh, I'm sure. So yeah, this is another example of things happening in the mid-90s that I don't want to say we take for, well, I guess we do kind of take them for granted
this
now.
It's really a bellwether of so many aspects of society that were so rare at that time, but that feel, whether the statistics bear it out or not, feel so much more commonplace today.
Yeah, indeed.
After Clay surrendered, police took him to the Kenton County Juvenile Detention Center to await arraignment in Boone County because Boone County didn't have a juvenile facility. Now, Mark, was it during that time that he had been placed in the Kenton County Juvenile Detention Center that your lawyer, Tom, would have been contacted?
Yes.
Okay, and so it was while Clay was there, having murdered his family, held his class hostage at school, and then been apprehended by police. This is where the story touches on your experience, and you take the call.
Correct. Tom did meet with him later that day for about a half hour, and that's when the proceedings started.
Okay. And was he kept in Kenton County?
Yes. Yes. The whole time throughout the trial, he was in Kenton County. He would have to be transported out to Boone County. And that's part one of the Clay Shrout case. I'm going to be on CNN. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Kentucky Case Files. Join us next time for part two, entitled Guilty but Mentally Ill. Sourcing for this podcast came from the Cincinnati Post, the Kentucky Post, the Cincinnati Enquirer, the Courier Journal, and the Lexington Herald Leader, which covered the killings widely and was our primary information source, along with Peter Langman's February 2016 article, Clay Shrout, and analysis, which can be found at www.schoolshooters.info. Media clips were obtained from WLWT Channel 5 and WXIX Fox 19 in Cincinnati. Additional interviews have supplemented our reporting.